Predators fans say goodbye for now to Zachary Leroux, Ozzy Weisblatt, and Adam Wilsby. On today's Locked On Predators, we'll talk through the roster decisions left for Trotz and Bruno. Plus, we'll tell you what you need to binge watch this weekend, and we have some spicy takes from a hat.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Friday episode. We want to welcome any first-time listeners in. Also want to give a shout out to our everydayers and to our Locked On Predators insiders who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. We appreciate your support. We love that we get to spend just a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
Yes, you do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
Well, we wondered what Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz were going to do with some Milwaukee players who each had really impressive training camps. Now we know. We're going to talk about what is next for the young guys who are headed back to the AHL and talk about the decisions that lie ahead for this Nashville coaching staff. Before we dive into all of that and a little more, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Emma, yesterday we learned that Zachary Leroux, Ozzy Weisblatt, and Adam Wilsby headed back to the AHL after an extended look here in Nashville. Very serious look from this coaching staff and I think from Barry Trotz. And I said this on yesterday's episode, but want to reemphasize it. I think these are three players who did everything that you would want them to do in training camp to make this decision tough on Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I mean, for players who have literally zero NHL experience, that's about as an extended look that you're going to get for, an AHL player. And I think all of them, like you said, they did everything they can do. They're the kind of guys that we talk about. They're going to be more valuable actually playing top 6 minutes regularly, which they're not going to be able to do in Nashville right now just because of the way the roster's set up. So get them back to Milwaukee, get them doing that. And then if you need them later in the year, you know what they're going to give you.
Yeah. I love that, especially with Zachary Leroux, looking at what each of them brought. He really brought all skill, no sus. Like there was no nonsense from Zachary Leroux. It was literally just a showcase of his speed, his skill, his talent, his ability to read the ice, his physicality, his commitment to the game. I thought Ozzy Weisblatt also showcased just what a fresh start can do for a player. We've talked about, some players who may have needed fresh starts. Weisblatt really got that and he took advantage of it with the Predators. He also is somebody who strikes me as this is your prototypical Andrew Brunette forward, maybe not the high skill level of a Filip Forsberg or a Steven Stamkos, but when you are looking for one of those identity style players, Ozzy Weisblatt has just absolutely got to make Andrew Brunette giddy.
For sure. I think he and Zach Leroux, one thing that they have in common is they're what Andrew Brunette calls their hunters. They're puck hunters, and they get in there, they get gritty, they get greasy. They're, not afraid to mix it up and do whatever they can to get to hunt pucks and maintain possession.
Yeah. And Adam Wilsby, just defensively, one of the things that we heard from Andrew Brunette is he's like, look, I didn't know very much about this kid. He just hadn't seen him. Adam Wilsby, another player drafted before Bruno. He's been in Milwaukee. He's just not been around Andrew Brunette much. And he lasted a long time in training camp, very physical defender and really impressed Andrew Brunette. So when we look at these three players headed back to Milwaukee, of course, Milwaukee's training camp already kicked off earlier in the week, so they're going to be joining the rest of the Admirals there. Emma, what are the chances and under what circumstances might we see one, two, all of these guys in Nashville to make a debut this season?
Well, there are a few different ways that could happen. I mean, the obvious one and the least desirable situation is if someone were to get injured.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the way that, you would end up seeing one of these guys likely on the roster. Or it could just be, someone is not having a good year. Like it's going to be a little different this year, though. We've talked about this before, that the Predators have been extremely fortunate the last couple of seasons with how many guys they had who were still waivers exempt. Like
Mm-hmm.
all of that comes off the table now. So Juuso Parssinen, Phil Tomasino, those are guys who are now going to have to pass through waivers to get sent back down. So, the risk of running, an Ellie Tolvanen situation.
Oh, gosh.
So I think that, that is maybe, it's always an option, right? It's still an option, but maybe, like one that they might be less likely to take. It just depends. But I mean, these guys, like, listen, they've done well. Like you said, they've done everything they can. I think it's just going to depend on what they can do in Milwaukee, like what the situation is in Milwaukee as far as late in the season, if there's a Calder Cup playoff run to consider, and what the state of the Predators situation is too, where are they in their playoff chase, and are these guys actually going to help them in that race? Then that's going to be the ultimate deciding factor.
Yeah. And like I said, they've done everything they can to show Andrew Burnett what he would get if for some reason they needed one or any combination of those players to come up to Nashville. You will see a lot of these guys in Milwaukee. You're looking at your top line guys, top defensive pairing guys. And look, Milwaukee games are a ton of fun to watch. I watch them via AHL TV. It's a subscription, but it is worth every penny to really get eyes on some of these guys. So going to see a lot of them in Milwaukee. This brings us to the question, who is left? So technically, there are 25 players on the roster with an asterisk. And that is Blankenberg was placed on waivers yesterday. Think he's going to end up in Milwaukee. And then we have the Spencer Stastny situation, who is still on the roster, but has not been to training camp, is out. Again, we've mentioned this previously for personal reasons. So what we see at training camp could be the 23 roster that, Andrew Burnett and Barry Trotz opt to start with, because, and let's just touch on a couple things about this Stastny situation. If Spencer Stastny comes back, do you see him coming back to Nashville? Do you see him going to Milwaukee for a little bit?
I would find it extremely hard to see him starting in Nashville whenever he does come back. And again, I've said this before, I don't mean that in any way to be a punishment of any sort for missing camp. We don't know what the situation is there. It's, not our business, and, hope the best for him. But I think that just knowing everything else at play, like it's not worth kind of rushing him back into things when they have actually a plethora of talent on the back end who can kind of fill that gap. I mean, you have Mark Del Gaizo, who's had a fantastic camp, and we've said, certainly deserves a spot on the NHL roster. Guys like Adam Wilsby, even obviously back in Milwaukee now, but could be a potential call up later in the year. I just think for Stastny, especially with him being on a two-way contract for the first year of his deal. It just,
Right.
there's so many things that make sense here, that like it just makes sense to put him in Milwaukee to start. It doesn't mean that he'll be stuck there all year necessarily. I just think that, that's what's going to make the most sense from every angle.
I agree with you on that. And again, the emphasis is this wouldn't be a punishment. It wouldn't be a punishment from Trotz, Brunette, anybody. But as people who have been at practice, you and I can say they have hit the ground running. Bruno's training camps are very hard. Steven Stamkos was like, I don't know when I have skated so much in a training camp, and
I
it's
mean,
hard to catch that if
well,
you've been off the ice.
I just think about Juuso Parssinen last year. He missed, part of training camp with an injury, and we saw what happened when he came back. He was like, it just looked like
Yeah.
he wasn't quite caught up, and and he ended up needing to go back to Milwaukee, kind of regroup, get his feet back under him before he eventually came back at the end of the season and, played in one playoff game. So I think that to me is where I think I'm like, okay, if a guy misses training camp for any reason
Mm-hmm.
and he's on a two-way contract and you have other very, very viable options to take his place, it's not worth like rushing him to put him on the NHL roster.
Yes. And Spencer Stastny is someone where, if he opts to come back and he is in Milwaukee, he will very easily work his way back into a position to be, I think, on the NHL roster, in time, with the experience he has, with his skill set as well. Tanner Molendyk, real quick, want to touch on that. Tanner Molendyk, 19-year-old Tanner Molendyk, still hanging around. He can play in the NHL for 9 games before his contract would kick in. There are still, like you said, there is a plethora of options on the blue line. Do you think that Tanner Molendyk plays some NHL games before he heads back to the CHL?
Quite honestly, I've been going back and forth on this.
Yeah.
I honestly think there's a chance now.
Mhm.
Like, I think there's a better chance than I would have thought maybe a few days ago. The fact that he is still here, and yes, obviously getting an extended look, I just think that, again, I don't know that I see him sticking on the roster, on the NHL roster. I would like to see him get kind of a 9-game tryout. Again, I've gone back and forth on my opinion on that too, but now the more I think about it, I'm like, you know what? If the Predators right now are in full send mode, like just give it all that we have, would you not want the most talent possible on your roster for as long as you could get them, and the most skill?
Mhm.
Tanner Molendyk is extremely skilled. And so I think that it's like, you know what? Maybe we do. Maybe we do give him a tryout. I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
like I don't see him taking anyone's roster spot. But I think, I just don't think he has anything left to prove in junior.
It's gonna be challenging for him to take his game to the next level, I think, at junior,
Yeah.
because he is so competitive already at the NHL level. Now, he doesn't have experience and there's tons of room to grow, but I could see him sticking around for 9 games. And, that's probably the biggest decision that we're waiting to see from Barry Trotz and from Andrew Brunette, as well as they communicate about that. So that's something we're going to have to keep our eyes on. Coming up, if anybody asks you, do you have plans this weekend? Your answer is yes, I'm busy. We're going to tell you what those plans should be, and we're going to update you on what the team worked on in practice and what Andrew Brunette had to say about confidence at this point in the preseason. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This is the most wonderful time of the year for sports fans. We have Major League Baseball playoffs. The NFL is well underway. And of course, the NHL kicks off the season today overseas. And the best place to celebrate is with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. NFL fans, you can kick off your season with a big return at FanDuel. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with any first $5 bet. And when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So check out the sports details and great deals at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, Emma, we are going to be busy binge watching some television this weekend, and it is not Bridgerton looking for Alexander Carrier. We will be watching someone else. So today, the docuseries drops on Amazon Prime, Face Off Inside the NHL, which features Nashville's very own Filip Forsberg. And let's be clear, it features Filip and Aaron Forsberg and my friends, Felix Forsberg. And that's who we're really all here to see.
Oh, yes. It's like listening to Phil and Aaron talking about the experience and how, being filmed, while she was pregnant, and, it gives them kind of a, it's documented their lives, in the final months before Felix arrived. And they're saying, this is so nice that we have this now.
Yeah.
And we can now show this to him. And, and he was part of this journey with us and all that. It reminds me of like my parents telling me, like, if I say I've been to a city or I haven't been to a city before, sometimes my parents are like, yes, you have, like when I was pregnant with you. I was like, okay. Okay. I feel like that's going to be Phil and Aaron Forsberg with Felix in a few years. If he's like, well, I've never been to dad's, youth hockey clinic. And we'll be like, yes, you have.
Yes, you have. And we have proof.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this series. I will admit, I love the series that they did with the receivers and the quarterbacks. I've watched all those. I love this series. And it's not just Filip Forsberg, although can never get enough of the Forsbergs, but Connor McDavid, Jeremy Swayman, David Pasternak, Matthew Tkachuk, plenty more. So a chance to get comfortable, get snacks, and do some binge watching. My question for you, Emma, would you ever do a docuseries like this?
Well, first of all, I don't know that anyone would have any interest in watching a docuseries about me. But I would ever, I don't know. I mean, like, would have to depend on the circumstances. Would I like to? Would I like welcome the opportunity with open arms? Not especially, no.
Yeah. Filip Forsberg does not necessarily strike me as the guy that was like, oh, heck yes.
Yeah.
But he did have his good friend George Kittle to maybe talk him through it because he was on the receivers one and he's so great. Like, I am certain that George Kittle and I are besties and we just haven't met yet. So great. So that is what we're going to be doing all weekend long. I'm sure you will be doing the same, and we'll be back next week to talk about any juicy tidbits from that. Did want to touch on a couple of comments from Andrew Brunette at practice yesterday. They spent some time working on something that Emma and I talked about on yesterday's episode for our everydayers, talked about those peeper zone entries. And one of the things that Andrew Brunette talked about, and they practiced these over and over again, was how important the zone entries are. And it's not like Emma and I haven't said the same thing. He must have been listening. But he talked about it's about timing. It's about chemistry. It's about anticipation. It's about the other team and knowing what to expect from the penalty kill. And this is definitely one of those small details that if the Predators can get locked down early, it's going to reap big rewards, because you're looking at, between Stamkos and Marchessault, you're looking at 27 combined power play goals, 56 power play points. You get none of that if you don't get set up. Emma, do you think that the Nashville Predators could be like a top 5 power play team if they can get this zone entry stuff down?
I think when you have Steven Stamkos on your power play, there's always a chance.
Yeah.
There's a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Right. I would say Do I think that is super likely? Probably not. But I definitely think that they should be ranked higher than they were last year. I mean, that's not saying that much, but I think
Nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, I'm thinking like top 10 is a reasonable expectation. Top 5, maybe. I mean, that'll be great, but I think that top 10 is probably a more reasonable goal to shoot for there.
Yeah. And I do think that's one of the areas where expectations are so high for Nashville right out of the gate, because as you mentioned, you added Steven Stamkos. This is one of those moments where, as much as I am an optimist, I'm like, oh, please be patient. Please be patient. It's going to take time for the power play and the zone entries and the chemistry to come together. I also asked Andrew Brunette, I said, look, expectations are high. We all know that. What is your confidence level at this point in the preseason? This is what Andrew Brunette had to say.
I mean, for me, it's hard. You feel good about your group, but you don't know when you start playing. I never really put a whole lot of emphasis on that. I don't really think about that. I think confidence is only when you continuously do the right thing over and over again, and it doesn't count. We're building, but it starts counting next Thursday, and then we'll see how much confidence we have.
I love Andrew Brunette. Andrew Brunette does not suffer from a massive case of optimism.
I was just saying, I was like, Bruno is my people. What have I been saying this whole time?
Yes.
Like, it's good. It's good. We'll celebrate the small victories along the way. Like, you got to acknowledge those, but it doesn't mean anything yet.
Yeah,
it's still
doesn't.
Fantasy hockey.
It is
fantasy hockey.
It's so interesting too, because as a coach, he is so stuck. People always say you don't see the forest for the trees, but his job is to be in the trees.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't really get the opportunity to sort of step back and see the forest, especially this early in the preseason. When you look at just overall preseason, training camp, what we've seen from the players on the ice at practices, what are you taking away from where this team is as far as confidence, as far as ready for the regular season? And what is your confidence level at this point, Emma?
I think this team is in as good of a spot as they can be at this point with a week left to go. I just think that, again, I said this on yesterday's episode, that I am anxious now. I'm like, get the season going. I want to see how this team, matches up against Dallas's, A1 guys, against Colorado, against Edmonton. I want to see that, because yes, it's good to see these guys in game situations against and I use air quotes, Carolina Hurricanes, but it wasn't really all the Carolina Hurricanes. And so I think that it's, I'm confident in this group, but I'm not, as fully on the train of like, oh, we got Stamkos, we got Marchessault, let's go. We're Stanley Cup or bust, baby. Like, I think there are going to be some growing pains, and I've said that before, but I'm excited. Like Bruno said, I'm excited to watch them in games that count.
Yeah. And this is a tough point in the preseason, because you have that new adrenaline of the first couple days of training camp that have worn off. You've got the roster sort of pared down, so that level of competition, in theory, is a little bit lower. And you've got preseason games, but they don't really count. And so far they, except for the Florida, back to or doubleheader, haven't really been against full-fledged NHL teams. I don't know that we're going to see a full-fledged NHL team against Carolina Saturday afternoon either. And so there's this potential for like the adrenaline crash to wear off. But I will say this, Andrew Brunette pointed out, that's why we have the veterans we have. That's why we've got the guys in the room, because they have to keep the energy up. They have to keep the drive up. They have to keep that hunger up. And I would say that we are seeing that in practice, even though we're sort of in this lull. I think the vibes are still good. I think the vibes are still pretty good.
The vibes are so good. And you can definitely tell it's the veterans who are pushing the pace in practice. I mean, a guy like Ryan O'Reilly is so valuable. I feel like we haven't talked about him at all because he's not our shiny new toy anymore. But I mean, a guy like him, so important for pushing the pace in practice. He's always communicating, talking to the younger guys, kind of pointing out where to go and where to be. And so I think that, that's the kind of veteran leadership that you need. And it, like you said, the vibes are good.
The vibes are good. Yep. Coming up, we are going to celebrate Fun Friday with a quick game of Takes from a Hat. You've heard us talk about our Locked On Predators insiders on today's show. Well, you can easily become one of our insiders via subtext as well. Locked On Predators insiders can talk Nashville Predators hockey with Emma and I beyond the podcast. And with the season kicking off in less than a week, there is no better time to jump in our conversations. We're going to share breaking news, injury updates, in-game stats, lineups, analysis, and we want to get your thoughts and questions that we'll use on the podcast. If you're looking to join our insiders community, you can click on the link in this video description or check it out in the link in our bio. Okay, Emma, we are here with the greatest piece of hockey swag that doesn't fit in the screen, the 10-gallon foam Nashville Predators hat. One of my pride and joys. Like if my house were burning down, I would get the 10-gallon hat and then I would be like, hey, husband.
Find your own way out.
Follow the hat. We'll get you out. It's probably super flammable now that I say that. I didn't like that first question. All right. Okay, we're just gonna go right to it because I am dying to get your take on this situation. What are your thoughts on the Jeremy Swayman situation with the Boston Bruins? Because y'all, this is a hot mess.
That is my exact thought. This is a hot freaking mess. And on both sides, when I'm listening to all of this, obviously much higher visibility because of the player involved and much higher stakes. We're talking about, more money and more term and things like that. But it makes me think back to with the Predators, the situation with Tyson Barrie last year. But this makes the Tyson Barrie situation look like nothing. That was just peanuts. This is this is so much drama. And I feel like we can kind of sit back and enjoy the drama because I'm one of those people that I love drama as long as it doesn't involve me. I want zero part of it. But if I can observe it from afar, give it to me. I'm here for the tea. And so I think that it's just gotten messy and I think poorly handled by both sides. To be quite honest, I mean, things are being said at some point, and I'm not even trying to make an accusation one way or another here, but at some point, either one or both sides of this argument have lied.
Yeah.
At least one, if not both, have lied to the public, to the media. Because, one side says something, the other says, well, this is the first time we're hearing of that. And it's just now, Boston is saying that they've offered him a $64 million contract. And then he and his agent come back and say, we've never heard that number before. And it's just it's now gotten out into the public and that just means it's messy. It's messy. And you have to wonder, it's just it's not a good look. It's not a good feeling too. If you're Jeremy Swayman and you're coming back to play for the Bruins, theoretically, at this point, you have to wonder, is that relationship damaged beyond repair?
Yes.
That's what I'm kind of interested to find out. And then I feel so bad for poor Jonas Korpisalo, their backup goalie, because it came out, I forget who, someone reported that Korpisalo was confirmed as the opening night starter for Boston. Of course, media then go and ask him about it. He goes, no one told me that. And it's just this poor guy he's probably like me. He's leave me out of it. I don't want to be involved.
I'm Switzerland.
Yeah. I'm just here to collect my paycheck. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it's not a good look, honestly,
Mm-mm.
on either side. But
This
I would say especially on the Bruins.
Yeah.
It's not a good look.
This is so the Real Housewives of the Boston Bruins level
Yes.
of you said what? No, you didn't. Yes, you did. You said this behind my back. No, you did. Wow. And keep in mind, in this docuseries, Jeremy Swayman is one of the people that they follow in this docuseries, and he says he kept a list and reviewed it, y'all, of things that Boston said about him at arbitration when they went to arbitration in 2023. And to which I say, I should send him an invisible backpack of hockey grudges to hold that sucker.
Yes.
And arbitration, like there are feelings involved. So I am with you. I will be very curious to see if this is a relationship that can be mended well enough on ice to not affect Boston's season and postseason hopes, because it is the definition of hot mess.
I think it's not directly related, but it
Mhm.
kind of is, I don't know, just an added sure, why not into this whole drama. Boston's season
Uh-huh.
opener against the Florida Panthers.
Oh.
They're like ultimate rivals from the playoffs the last 2 years.
Oh.
And since it's the opener and it's in Florida, it'll be their banner raising ceremony. And I'm like, I have some Boston
Oh.
fans in my life who are like, they did this on purpose. The NHL hates Boston. And I'm like, all right, no, they didn't. But objectively, it's kind of funny.
It's fun to watch, y'all. It's fun to watch. All right, here we go. Which Nashville player, one past, so we're actually looking for two answers. Which Nashville past player and present roster player would you most want to see in an NHL docuseries?
Oh. Well, I know present player
Mhm.
for sure. We have to go with Luke Evangelista.
Oh my
just
gosh.
because
Can you
I think
imagine?
kids built for the camera. Like he is made to be in front of the camera. I honestly I would love that. I would watch that show.
Everybody would watch that show.
Past player.
Mhm.
Ooh, I think I'm gonna go with like kind of an under the radar pick here.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna say Yakov Trenin because
Yes.
Yak is, without trying to be, one of the funniest people I've ever met.
So hilarious.
He's so funny. And
So
it's like,
funny.
and he's so deadpan too with his
Mhm.
humor that like if you're not really paying attention, you miss it.
Yeah.
He also has a very sweet wife and a very adorable puppy. So I'm like, all of those things point
Yeah.
to like, yes, I want to see more of that. But he's just a really interesting guy. He likes to cook. He learned English by watching reruns of Friends when he got to the US,
Yeah.
and like that's how he learned to speak English. So like, I don't know. I just think that he's a very interesting guy, and again, under the radar, hilarious without even trying to be.
Oh my gosh. Delivers one-liners with that Russian I'm a little dead inside thing. And you
Yes.
almost don't know what to do with it. So funny.
Yep.
I miss him. I would say past, I would love to see Jordan Tutu in a docuseries, just because I think where he came from, and he had such a tumultuous time in his late teens, early 20s, and just walking through that. I would love to see that. Present, what's funny, Evangelista wasn't on my radar, but you nailed it. The other one I would say, if he were here, would be Spencer Stasny, because again, I'm certain he is the Dos Equis man, or Ryan O'Reilly.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by Ryan O'Reilly because he is such a family man, but he is also so dedicated to his craft. And I'm just curious to see what does walking that out look like. So for me, I'd take any of those.
Those are
But Luke
good ones.
Evangelista, made
Yeah.
for that.
Oh, yeah.
That would be his best life. And I don't know if
yeah.
you and I would be horrified or delighted.
I know I would be delighted personally, even if he is, eating cereal out of frisbees with Mark Del Gaizo. I'd be like, yes, more of this.
More
This is
of
the
this.
content we need.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for a real quick game of takes for my hat. And that's going to do it for this Friday episode. I can't believe the week is over. Next week, we are going to be prepping for the regular season, y'all. On Monday's show, we will, of course, recap Saturday afternoon's 4:00 home game against the air quote Carolina Hurricanes. We suspect we will see the air quote Carolina Hurricanes in that game, but we're going to break down, of course, what we see from the Nashville Predators from the roster and what we see from the team at home. So be sure you tune in for the show again on Monday. Before we sign off for the week, Emma, let everyone know where they can find you and your work.
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio as well. That is going to do it for this week's episodes of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back on Monday with an all new episode. We'll see you then.